and you've got to be an actor really, and you've got to be good and loud too, you know.
Lemmy Kilmister wasn't just the leader of Motorhead, he was rock and roll's unfiltered conscience, a man who lived by a strict code of authenticity. His opinions were as raw and powerful as his music, and fans celebrated him for never holding back his brutally honest thoughts on any subject. But that same legendary honesty had a razor-sharp edge, and he aimed it directly at the artists he believed were phony, pretentious, or simply awful. To find yourself on his bad side meant facing a public verbal takedown from one of music's most respected and intimidating figures. Today, we reveal the 5 musicians who felt the full, unfiltered force of Lemmy's passionate disdain. 1. Joe Elliott.
Yes, this is my home of the last 38 years I've lived here.
The angry story of Lemmy's fight with Joe Elliott is a perfect lesson learned on the road, where your reputation is the only thing you truly own. The year was 1979. A movement called the New Wave of British Heavy Metal was taking over England. But this movement was split. On one side, you had a band like Motorhead. They were loud, fast, and ugly. They were more like a punk band than a typical metal band. On the other side were younger, cleaner-sounding bands like Def Leppard. From their very first day, they wanted to be on the radio and play in huge arenas in America. Motorhead was already a big deal, having just released their legendary albums Overkill and Bomber. They were the headliners, the stars of the show. When they took Def Leppard on tour as their opening band, it was like mixing oil and water. A crash was coming. For Lemmy, the rules of being a rock band were a holy code. He learned this code over many years of sleeping on strangers' floors and playing for 10 people in a dirty pub. You must show up on time. You must play with all your energy. You must not complain. And you must always thank the band that gave you a chance. In Lemmy's clear view, Joe Elliott and his band broke every single one of these important rules. It wasn't just one small mistake. It was their whole attitude. They acted like they were already rock gods. And this made Lemmy, a man from a simple working-class background, very angry. The biggest scandal of the tour was a moment of pure, shocking disrespect. The story goes that Def Leppard, the brand new opening act, felt they were too important to do a full, proper sound check before a show. Then, during their concert, they had the nerve to act angry that their sound was bad. They even complained about it on stage and blamed Motorhead's crew for the problems. For Lemmy, this was the ultimate insult. His road crew was his family. Seeing these young kids act like spoiled brats who refused to do their job and then blamed the hard-working crew made his blood boil. This was not just unprofessional. It was an insult to the idea that you have to earn your success. The final explosion happened at a show in Newcastle. After Def Leppard finished their set, a furious Joe Elliott supposedly stormed into the dressing room. He started kicking furniture and screaming about the bad sound and the boring audience. Lemmy heard the screaming and decided he had seen enough. He walked in and confronted Elliott. We don't know the exact words that were said, but the result was fast and final. Lemmy fired them from the tour right there on the spot. They were just a bit snotty, Lemmy said later, trying to make it sound like no big deal. They were getting a bit of a name for themselves, and they were a pain in the butt. But his anger was about more than just a bad attitude. He hated what Def Leppard's music stood for. He heard a pop band trying to look like a rock band. Their clean sound and catchy songs were a betrayal of the raw, simple power that he loved. In a famous interview years later, he gave the final word on the matter. "I don't see the difference between Def Leppard and the Spice Girls," he said. This wasn't just a funny line. It was Lemmy officially kicking them out of his church of rock and roll forever. Lemmy's insults were as legendary as his music. If you love hearing the unfiltered truth from rock's most honest voice, hit subscribe because he was just getting warmed up. Lemmy's problem with bands that pretended to be something they weren't didn't stop with Def Leppard. He saved some of his meanest words for an American singer he hated about the 1980s. 2. John Bon Jovi.
Guy would pull up in his brand new Corvette, and you're like, I'm in a 1963 Buick Special with a hole in the...
If you ever wanted to see Lemmy Kilmister look truly disgusted, you just had to bring up hair metal and the shining, perfect-haired king of that whole world. The ultimate symbol of everything Lemmy hated about 80s rock was John Bon Jovi. The 1980s was the decade of MTV. This new TV channel changed the music world completely. All of a sudden, how a band looked was more important than how they sounded. Lemmy, a man who once joked that his band looked like they robbed a bank, watched this new world with total horror. He saw rock and roll, a powerful force that was supposed to be dangerous, honest, and gritty, being turned into a silly, fake fashion show. And John Bon Jovi was the master of this new, fake world. In Lemmy's eyes, Bon Jovi was not a real musician. He was a product, like a can of soda, perfectly made and sold to as many people as possible. The huge hair, the fancy clothes, and the perfect white smiles were a direct insult to the tough, leather-clad, and scarred image of the rock heroes Lemmy looked up to, like Gene Vincent. The main scandal for Lemmy was this complete betrayal of what rock music was all about. He believed that Bon Jovi and similar bands had taken the true rebellious spirit of rock and turned it into a joke. It was all about looks, not about the music itself. And the music, Lemmy thought, was weak. Bon Jovi are the opposite of us, Lemmy said in a powerful interview. We're the darkness, they're the light. It's all, have a nice day, and the world's a wonderful place. It's not. The world is a horrible place. He hated the happy, positive messages in their songs. For him, rock music was about facing the hard and ugly truths of life. It was a way to scream about your problems, not a happy song to help you forget them. He felt their music was emotionally fake. Lemmy's anger was very specific. He attacked the famous power ballads that made Bon Jovi huge stars. He called them music for girls and saw them as a cheap trick to sell more records, not as real songs about love and pain. His most famous quote about the band shows exactly how he felt. "Are you actually kidding me? They're not a rock and roll band. They're not even a rock band." This was not just him saying he didn't like them. This was Lemmy, a man who many saw as the definition of rock and roll, saying they did not belong in the same category. He saw their amazing success not as a sign of their talent, but as a sign that they were great at fooling people. The personal stake for Lemmy was that this fake version of rock was taking over the world. It was taking up space on the radio and in record stores that he felt should have gone to real, honest bands. He believed that John Bon Jovi had tricked millions of people into thinking a pop star was a rock star. And to Lemmy, there was no bigger crime against music. While he simply dismissed pretty boys like Bon Jovi as fakes, Lemmy had a much more complicated and personal anger for another famous singer. 3. Axl Rose.
Out there and what medium I would be listening to it in. I mean, you meet people.
One of the big puzzles in Lemmy's world was his feelings about Guns N' Roses. He was very good friends with their legendary guitarist, Slash. He loved their first album, Appetite for Destruction. He thought it was brilliant and powerful. He saw it as a return to the dangerous, street-level rock and roll that he felt was missing from music. He could hear the influence of his own heroes in their songs, but he could not stand the man singing those songs, Axl Rose. Lemmy's problem with Axl had nothing to do with music. It was about his character. Lemmy built his entire 40-year career on being a professional. He always showed up, and he always delivered. He saw Axl Rose as a spoiled, unprofessional baby, whose giant ego was destroying a great band and, even worse, disrespecting the fans who paid to see him. The crazy stories about Axl Rose's behavior are famous, and Lemmy paid attention to every one of them. He heard about how Axl would show up hours late to his own concerts. Sometimes he wouldn't show up at all, leaving thousands of angry fans waiting in a stadium. He saw the videos of Axl's famous on-stage meltdowns. He would suddenly stop a show in the middle of a song to yell at a security guard or complain about the sound system. This kind of behavior was a nightmare to Lemmy. For him, playing a show was a sacred promise to the audience. You get on that stage, and you give the people who spent their hard-earned money everything you have. Then you say, "Thank you," and get off. You can't keep people waiting for 2 hours, Lemmy said with real anger in his voice. That's not rock and roll. That's just being a horrible person. He believed that no matter how big of a star you become, you are never more important than your audience. This was a deeply personal issue for Lemmy because of his friendship with Slash. He saw his friend, a truly great and dedicated musician, being constantly embarrassed and held back by his own singer. Friends said that during the worst years, Slash would often go to Lemmy for advice at their favorite bar, the Rainbow in Los Angeles. He would complain about Axl's latest crazy drama. Lemmy saw Axl as a man who was holding one of the world's best bands hostage. The most famous scandal was the Riverport riot in 1991. During a show, Axl saw a fan with a camera. He got angry that security didn't take it away, so he jumped off the stage, tackled the fan, punched him a few times, got back on stage, grabbed the microphone and said, "Well, thanks to the lame-ass security, I'm going home," and ended the show. This caused a massive riot. Thousands of fans destroyed the venue, and many people were injured. To Lemmy, this wasn't dangerous rock and roll. It was the pathetic and irresponsible action of a child. He saw a man with a once-in-a-generation voice who was destroying it all because he lacked the simple discipline and respect to be a professional. For Lemmy, your character was just as important as your music. If you appreciate this deep dive into his strict moral code, make sure you're subscribed for more surprising truths. Lemmy's anger at unprofessional singers was one thing, but maybe his most surprising attack was aimed at another legend. 4. Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah, it was mainly the drugs, but we were managing ourselves because we'd been ripped off.
In the world of heavy metal, everyone just assumes that the founding fathers of the music are all great friends who love and respect each other's work. That is why it was such a complete shock when people found out what Lemmy Kilmister really thought about the music of his good friend, Ozzy Osbourne. Lemmy and Ozzy were true friends. They came from similar poor working-class families in England. They had toured the world together, shared many drinks, and were bonded as two of the ultimate survivors of the crazy rock and roll life. Lemmy truly loved Ozzy as a person. But when the conversation turned to Ozzy's world-famous, genre-inventing band, Black Sabbath, Lemmy did not let friendship stop him from speaking his true, controversial opinion. He hated their music. The scandal here is how bold Lemmy was. It's like a famous movie director saying he thinks The Godfather is a boring movie. Lemmy broke the #1 rule of the metal world. You do not insult Black Sabbath. But Lemmy's brutal honesty was more important to him than being polite. His main problem with the band was very simple. He thought they were incredibly slow. Motorhead's entire sound was built on speed and raw, frantic energy. Black Sabbath, on the other hand, created their heavy sound by slowing everything down into a thick, dark, and heavy sludge. For Lemmy, it was just boring. "I could never stand Black Sabbath," he admitted in an interview, which shocked the entire metal world. "It was so slow. I like things to be a bit more frantic. It's just not for me." He heard their legendary heavy guitar riffs, not as powerful, but as slow and clumsy. They didn't have the driving beat that he believed was necessary for real rock and roll. His criticism was not just about the speed, he also had a problem with the entire feeling of the band. Millions of fans loved the dark and gloomy lyrics of Black Sabbath. Lemmy just thought it was depressing. "I mean, I'm miserable, but I'm not that miserable," he once joked, making his point with a sharp sense of humor. This created a very weird and interesting situation. Lemmy would be hanging out with Ozzy backstage, laughing and telling stories, and then in his next interview, he would say that his friend's legendary band was terrible. This shows that Lemmy could completely separate the person from their art. He respected Ozzy's amazing career, but he would not pretend to like the music that made Ozzy famous. Their friendship was so strong that Ozzy even asked Lemmy to write lyrics for his solo album, No More Tears. Lemmy wrote 4 songs in just a few hours, including the huge hit, Mama, I'm Coming Home. Lemmy later joked that he made more money from that one song than from his entire time in Motorhead. This makes his dislike for Sabbath's music even more fascinating. It was a matter of pure musical principle. His complicated feelings about a fellow metal legend were one thing, but his pure, raw hatred for the biggest pop star in the world was brutally simple and very clear. 5. Madonna. If Lemmy thought that some rock bands were fake or boring, he saw the entire world of mainstream pop music as the real enemy. It was the complete opposite of every single thing he believed in. And in the 1980s, and for many years after, the absolute queen of that pop music kingdom, the ultimate symbol of manufactured fame, was Madonna. For Lemmy, she wasn't just a singer he didn't like. She represented a sickness in our culture. He saw her as a brilliant businesswoman, not a true artist. He believed she was someone who just chased whatever was popular to make money, instead of creating something real and honest from the heart. His hatred for her was pure, simple, and he always expressed it with his famous and shocking honesty. There was no single bad experience or backstage fight that caused Lemmy's anger. Instead, he hated her entire career and everything she stood for. He watched her build a global brand through a series of carefully planned controversies and slick, empty pop songs. In Lemmy's world, a world of dirty clubs and loud amplifiers, music was supposed to be a raw, emotional thing that came from deep inside you. He was sure that Madonna's music was created in a lab by a team of businessmen and producers. During the famous documentary movie made about his life, the interviewer asked him for his quick opinion on a few famous people. When the name Madonna was mentioned, Lemmy did not even stop to think. He leaned forward and gave a one-word answer. The word is too vulgar to print here, but it was the strongest and most insulting word he could possibly use. It showed a level of deep personal hatred that was shocking. He saw her as a sign of a sick society, one that cared more about being famous than having talent, and more about how you look than what you have to say. The scandal, in Lemmy's mind, was that the entire world had been fooled. While he and his band lived on a tour bus for 40 years, getting sweaty in clubs and staying true to their music, he saw people like Madonna become billionaires by selling what he considered to be musical garbage. It was a deep personal insult to his life's work and his values. He saw her many scandals, like the controversy over her Like a Prayer music video, not as real acts of rebellion, but as clever marketing tricks designed to get attention and sell more albums. Lemmy knew the difference between real danger and a planned publicity stunt. He wasn't just a rock musician who didn't like pop music. He was a true believer who saw a false god taking over the world, and he felt it was his job to scream the truth about it as loudly and as offensively as he could. Lemmy's hate wasn't random. It was a form of protection for the music he loved. For him, rock and roll was a war against the fake. Tell us what you think. Like and subscribe for more.